Okay, so I've been thinking about making this video for a while. This could go into the ageism videos or really playlist, and even what was the other thing called? Money Matrix, Young Achievers. That's another playlist, and then it was something else. I don't know. This could like go into a lot of things I talk about, even the Geronophile thing. I may sound sick because I kind of am, because I've been staying indoors. And as I mentioned, I'm allergic to building chemicals, or really just like stuff that's just floating around in the air inside of buildings, because like there's not a lot of airflow and the air's dry. And then it like causes like all types of issues for me, which a lot of people don't get. And I remember when it used to be worse, like I would have to spend so much time outside just to not be sitting in the house throwing up all day, although I don't have it like that bad anymore. But my throat gets dry and I get sinus infections, like my eyeballs hurt, which is weird because I don't remember getting that symptom before. But anywho, so in plenty of videos I talk about how how not realizing I was a kid until recently has caused a lot of issues for me. And then I think my most recent Young Achievers video, I kind of describe it as like, I don't know, like if a dude thinks he's dating a woman but then he finds out that actually it's a man. I feel like maybe that's a good way to describe like how confusing it is. And then of course, like even with my situation, as I mentioned, when you're a street kid, you're not seen as a kid anyways, or really realistically, even if you're not a street kid, when you don't visibly have parents, you're not seen as a kid. People pretty much see you as like up for grabs. And so that's why I mentioned the whole thing with like how people out in society will just tell you, if they don't do the whole "you're a child, just go home" thing, they'll tell you, well, you're grown, so now you have to be somebody's living sex slave, or they just tell you that you should have been got a job in a house and a car 13 years ago and stuff like that. And it also has something to do with just like how homeless hate is, and then there's a lot of stuff with that. But kind of like how where I'm at now, especially when it comes to quote-unquote black people, and then I'm also in the South, due to the common generational Jezebel spirit and generational trauma, the family systems are usually Jezebelic, and typically the toxic mom and dad, if he's there, if he's allowed around, and even grandparents run the show pretty much, but especially the toxic Jezebelic mom. And so due to that, as I've been wanting to really go in depth on, people aren't, how do I put it? They're not used to seeing street kids. They're not really used to seeing homeless youth in general. And of course there's just the fact that like people in America pretend it doesn't exist, or they just do the whole, well, if you're, especially if you're under 30, they'll be like, well, you're not really homeless, then you just need to go home and stuff like that. There's somewhere you're supposed to be at that you're not at. So they do the whole, you did something to get kicked out, or you're bad and you left, all that stuff. Which is so weird to me, because it's like, well, I mean, if homeless youth aren't really homeless, then is anybody really homeless? Because I would assume that like a lot of people of any age could just quote unquote go home, but there's a reason that they don't, because they're not safe or whatever in the world. Maybe they were in foster care, but it's like, I assume that maybe the idea with this is that people feel like, especially in these types of, I don't know, communities or cultures, I guess I could say, younger people can't take care of themselves. And also the idea that like maybe if somebody's like, I don't know, 50 or something, maybe their parents are dead, so people may feel like, well, they can't go home because their parents probably aren't even still alive anyways. Or they'll be like, this person, especially if they're a dude, they'll feel like, well, maybe this person's too old to still be living with their parents anyway, so they're really homeless, but younger homeless people aren't really homeless because they just need to go home and they're just runaways and stuff like that. But it's also like this idea of, I don't know how else to put it. Too many quote-unquote black people and even quote-unquote white people are just too used to like sucking up to their Jezebelic mom and never like doing what they could have done in life, because just like in the screenshot in the beginning, really, that's an example of infantilization and covert SA, and it's really common for Jezebelic parents, especially moms, to do Munchausen and covert SA, where like they're doing weird sexual stuff, forcing you to let them give you showers and baths, or even forcing you to take showers and baths with them when you're way too old for that. I personally feel like anybody who's like 4 or older should be able to take a bath by themselves anyways, but especially like any older than like 8, but I don't even really know too many 8-year-olds that would even want to do that. So it's just all weird, but it's covert SA. It's an example of how Jezebelic parents will like pretty much handicap you or force you to like be handicapped, to trap you in the family system so you can never do anything to take care of yourself, to get out. And I'm not saying that like you have to go into the matrix and you have to do the whole job thing and all that stuff. That's just like the mainstream narrative, obviously, that people are made to feel like there's no possible way of surviving without that. One of the things with quote-unquote black people especially is that they're going to automatically assume that I'm older, not just because like people, that's just what people rather believe and see in the world, so they're just going to assume that I'm in my like late 30s, even though some people will say that they don't really get how anybody could think that, but I don't know. Or what else was it? They'll assume that I'm in my late 30s. The youngest people typically want to assume that I am is like 25, 26. Which even some people will find that hard to believe in. One of the things about it, I really hope this is like coming out right, but one of the things about it as well is that, one, people in America pretend that youth homelessness doesn't exist, and they don't want people to know that, well, how do I put it? Oh yeah, the same stuff I mentioned in the minor crisis videos, especially that one about Mark Leda and how why Americans hate Mark Leda, because he shows the issues of America pretty much. People can just make it about other things, or they can like constantly talk about the Nova Girl situation and make it about that, but people really don't want abuse victim stories out there. They don't want abuse victims telling their stories, and they don't want people to know the stuff that really goes on in America. Kind of like with the Billy situation, as I mention all the time, with those screenshots of like people flipping out about that lady who made that documentary about homelessness in LA and how the American dream wasn't real, and also just the whole thing with the Billy situation and how this one dude was like, you mean to tell me in a place like America there's nowhere for a kid in a situation like this to go for help? And then of course people were like, he has places to go, he just wants to be a bum and all of that. People don't want reality out there, and people don't like to see things for what they are, and admit that what really goes on does, because it makes them not be able to go to sleep at night. And then if they do see a situation that they don't like and they can't lie to themselves about it, they'll just blame you for it. That's why abuse victims are blamed, or that's one of the many reasons, aside from the fact that most people aren't safe anyways, and that's like, there's a lot I could say about that. So most people are going to be flying monkeys and enablers in the Lucifer effect. But like a lot of quote-unquote white people, especially back when I was on the West Coast, would claim to think that I'm somewhere from 11 to 14. Even white people here do that too. But I notice where I'm at here, because people are so brainwashed by their Jezebelic mom, who won't even let them work a job at 35 and won't let them leave the house. They feel like there's no possible way for somebody that age, or even way older than that, to take care of themselves, which is why, or one of the many reasons why people just assume that I'm 38. And so it's just really weird, but They just feel like if you're younger and you're out here, you're just gonna automatically die, or if you're a woman, you're gonna automatically die or something. And what else was it with that? Oh yeah, but like in the West Coast and different places where people are used to seeing homeless 11-year-olds and 14-year-olds. Even though like when you're a homeless youth, even if you're 18 plus, you have to do a lot of hiding, but sometimes you're definitely going to be seen. And so like when they're used to it, they don't put anything past. Maybe this is like a homeless 14-year-old or 15-year-old or whatever, or a homeless 18-year-old or 20-year-old. They don't put anything past it because they see it all the time and they know it happens all the time, especially with foster kids or just people having to escape abuse or getting kicked out. Or like in LA, it's not pretty often, but it's not a not known about thing, even though people will pretend it doesn't exist, but it's a known thing that like sometimes there are homeless 7-year-olds with abusive parents who get kicked out, or they're in foster care and they get dumped out. So like maybe around here if somebody sees a homeless 7-year-old, they'll assume that the kid's just lost, or they'll assume maybe somehow they're just way older than they actually are, but they just look really young somehow, because that's what people rather tell themselves. But in a place where they're used to seeing it, they'll be like, oh, that's just another homeless 7-year-old. Or people will be like, in certain places, that's not a thing that happens in America, so I can't be seeing what I'm actually seeing. So yeah, pretty much, hopefully that made sense, but that's how it goes pretty much. And that's one of the things that I wanted to go on a rant about. Not that that has much to do with like the main topic of this video, but another thing, or to get to the point, as I always say, you're a child or you're a kid until somebody wants to have sex with you. They want to lock you up in some institution, blame you for something, or I don't remember what the other thing was. Oh, and until you're homeless, or just until people feel like you should be doing more than you are for yourself, or even if you are taking care of yourself, if people feel like, I don't know, you should be able to do more, then they'll play these different little mind games with you, because it's all biased. There is no such thing as a child or an adult, really. And as I always say, the child and minor terms are pro-abuse. That's really all the terms are for, is to okay abuse. And while I don't believe in the child term, I would say that if anybody was to be labeled off as a child, it should be people under 9 or 8, or at least under 10. Anything 10 or older is definitely not a child. But of course, sometimes the child term can be used for the same thing as the you're grown or whatever term. So like, the same way people could say, well, you should have sex with me because you're grown, they could do the same thing with the child term. You have to have sex with me because you're a child, and you have to do whatever grown people tell you to do. So they can sometimes be used interchangeably. In my different ageism playlists, especially the, what is it titled? Ageism and Cataclysmic Repositioning playlist, I talk about the whole thing with like how a lot of the ageist stereotypes and tropes, they're created by media that's made by chomos that typically revolves around rich white people. So it doesn't even revolve around like the majority of people. It revolves around a small percentage, and it's still very fairy tale like, because it gives the whole fake, what do they call it, nuclear happy family thing, even though that's not even how the rich families go. Because like you see situations like Ruby Frank and what's those people, the Menendez brothers' parents, and chomos and Epstein and stuff like that. And it's weird how like people like that are considered like the face of white excellence, but then you'll have the different white supremacists that don't like lower level Caucasians that'll throw out the white trash term for like poor white people. And it's really interesting that like chomo SRA people like the Menendez brothers' parents are like the idea of white excellence in Beverly Hills or wherever they live, something like that, somewhere in Cali. But then I don't even know what else to say about it. It's like the media pushes like this good view of like the quote-unquote happy rich white family. That's really not even how those families are for real. But that could be a whole nother video. But I already have a whole playlist about abusive YouTube parents. But anywho, so there's that. But point is, people's idea of ageism and what, like, being somebody who's a teenager or someone in their 20s, none of that stuff is real. It's all stereotypes that most people don't fit, like the whole quote-unquote rebellious teenager phase and what's the other terms? Teenage angst and these different weird terms that are made up by chomos. The hormone bullcrap that's also made up by chomos who are obsessed with puberty and different stuff like that. Even though the brain never stops developing anyways. But what's the other thing with that? And then like the whole rebellious teenage rock music emo phase, stuff that revolves around mostly white people. Not even because really all the media is social conditioning. So like just like somebody with mixed kid trauma once told me, quote unquote black people try too hard to act black. And it could even be the same for quote unquote white people. People are acting like how they were told they have to act by media. The media told you the only thing you can do is become a rapper who's in the DL effeminate thug persona. And then the media tells other people that the only thing they can do is be a emo teenager who's running around talking about unaliving themselves, which honestly is pushed onto both the groups because for one, all the music was made by Judah Tribe Bantus, but also rock music and rap music especially has a lot of the same or similar social conditioning in it, like unalive people, unalive yourself, stuff like that. So what else could I say with that? Just none of that stuff is real. And then that goes into the next thing, which is that people always say this whole thing about how people want to grow up too fast and then when you get older you want to be a child again. Honestly, that's all bullcrap. There's no such thing as a child or a childhood. Adulthood is just, well, what do I usually say? People are just doing whatever they're told they have to do and being whatever they're told they have to be at different ages in their life. So like when you get a certain age, or really not even that, if you have an abusive family system or no family system, you pretty much never have that safe, peaceful, no worries period of your life. Your whole life from before you're even born, starting in the womb, is just worries and struggles and trying to take care of yourself. Different stuff like that. Which, to be truthfully honest, in the West, people want to infantilize and coddle and abuse and traumatize their kids all at the same time. So, like, they want to pretend that like you're a stupid kid well into your 30s, but then they want to like trap you and make you feel like you have to hold on to dear life till 18, even though realistically, even if you did leave at 18, people are still going to say your child go back home. They do all of that stuff and tell you can't survive on your own and the best place to be is with your quote-unquote family, your quote-unquote parents. And they do all that to try to trap you in abuse situations. And like I mentioned with the whole Chinese kids stuff, or like a lot of people have been talking about, well, it definitely is like a lot of stuff to force onto a kid. And I know the school system is indoctrination anyways. It's better for like somebody to learn how to cook and clean for themselves as a toddler to be infantilized, not allowed to use a microwave till 35, just to trap them in an abuse situation and to trap them with their abusive mom, where they're getting essayed and stuff, and then they can't leave because they've never been allowed to work a job before. They're being told they're a quote-unquote kid and they're stupid and they're just being grown and all that bull crap. I don't even know if this is really coming out how I want it to, because I think my nervous system is too dysregulated from being in a house for a couple of days. But dang, now it's starting to rain really bad. Okay, so I may sound more sick, to be honest, but I'm inside now. But what was I saying? Pretty much people want to convince the youth
Okay, so I'm pretty sure I forgot to mention the whole thing.
a lot less capable than they really are, especially in the West.
Where
to try
Billy
to
Software Underbelly was talking
infantilize
about how
them
he was trying
and
to become
trap
financially
them in
stable.
bad
Somebody in the comments was like, trying to become
situations pretty
financially stable at
much.
14 is wild, but honestly, it's really not.
Like
And it
even the
shouldn't have to
child
be.
labor
And it shouldn't be
laws.
hard. If you're gonna have to be homeless for being trafficked and homeless by CPS, you should at least be able to get a job.
It's funny how could I summarize this part? Like, going back to the whole Mark-related thing, the screenshot of the documentary I talk about at the beginning of that video, where, like, it's okay when people go and make videos about homeless kids in other countries, but when people do that in America, people have a field day because, quote-unquote, we have laws in our country. But realistically, if the laws weren't set up to trap people in abuse situations, 7 and 8-year-olds and etc. will be able to get jobs. And I know people talk about child labor bullcrap. If people cared about child labor for the same job that people wouldn't
someone
get paid
who's
less than
like
the same
quote unquote white or
jobs
something would get
that
paid
older
more
people
for, like, even
get paid more for.
I don't know. I'm trying to think of
And
a good
there's also a
example,
racial side to
like
that as
a
well,
younger
where,
person
like,
getting
people who are
paid
melanated will
$7.50
get
now
paid
to do the same job
$7.50.
that maybe somebody else is getting paid 14 plus or 20 to do. And at the end of the day, the child labor thing, it was still really interesting, because one thing that people never point out with that is that quote-unquote white people claim to have ended slavery, which slavery will never end, everybody's a slave, but they claim to have ended slavery. And then they started having their own kids work as slaves, and they weren't even getting paid for it, and they were like passing away and stuff. And then people started the
as
whole
far as the
anti-child
or
labor
trauma-based mind
bullcrap,
control trafficking with triage.
Having somebody as a slave is having somebody as a slave. White people having their kids as slaves is them having their kids as slaves. But as far as child labor, quote-unquote children, whatever that really means, should be able to work when they need to. As I always say, a 7-year-old and a 12-year-old shouldn't have to prostitute to be able to eat. They should be able to go get a job at a factory or McDonald's if they need to. Not to mention, as I've talked about before, being allowed to work younger actually helps you, especially when it comes to, like, being in abuse situations that really screw up your social skills and, like, your physical health and all of that. You learn, like, the working endurance younger. I noticed that people who are infantilized or just go through financial abuse and aren't allowed to work in their abuse situation, when they do escape and they're able to work, they're, like, not able to really work a job because of, like, different things like trauma symptoms and stuff like that. This isn't, like, a good explanation, but pretty much people who are allowed to work in their abuse situation pretty much
end up in a better situation, at least financially, sooner than people who were never allowed to work.
Jezebel teaches you to become dependent on her and to be
Couldn't
codependent
work
on
for whatever reason. So, like, for example, my older neighbor's sister, she had to get a job, and luckily she was allowed to eventually, which is kind of a long story because they were all kicked out at 14 anyways. And so I think she got her first job at 14 or 15, which was kind of hard because of, like, the ageism and stuff. And she was working at Rose's, and she worked that job for years. I remember she made a joke once about how she thought that she was rich. And then she realized that she was actually severely underpaid because she got paid $7.50, which is, I mean, it's the minimum wage in the South. And so, anywho, then eventually she got a job for some other company. I can't remember which one it is. It's one of those, like, insurance places, I guess. And she's worked there for some years now. I don't know how long. And that's helped her to be able to get a place. But then, like, some of our other siblings who are scapegoats really badly, other than just me, like our, I don't know if he's older or younger than her, but I know my older scapegoat sister, my older halfway scapegoat brother, they were, kicked out at 14, even kind of younger as well, and went through the usual traumatic stuff, but due to different stuff with their trauma symptoms and just a whole bunch of different things, they never were really able to work a job, and that's pretty much left them stuck in the cycle of not being able to make money for themselves, other than the fact that, like, they drove my older scapegoat sister crazy within the past couple years, but there's also that. So, yeah. But, anywho, I think now I said everything I needed to say, but I feel like I'm forgetting something. But I went to sleep for a couple hours. But anywho, people like to say this ageist trope, which is that people want to be grown, which as far as the grown term, especially with like the southern or quote-unquote black side to it, that can mean a lot of different things. Typically it means stupid stuff. So, like, as I've always said since before the abuse evidence channels, it doesn't really make sense when people say that somebody's being grown when they're doing things that they should never do at any age. But it's also a term that's used for people who are hypersexual from trauma. In fact, I've been meaning to make a short clip edit. That song I shared some months ago by that, I don't remember what that lady's name was. I think it was called Be For Better, because I finally found out the name of it, where she was singing about pretty much the issues of the community, like the molester uncle, well, that's a typical situation really with all ethnic groups, which is very interesting how that goes. But the molester uncle, what else was she talking about? Oh yeah, she was like, what's the point of being sad? They're just gonna label you as fast. I meant to make like a clip, because it kind of made me think about the Nova situation, and really just a lot of different situations with people on software and underbelly. But those types of labels are also sexist, especially with the sexual side. So typically it's only going to get thrown on girls who are hypersexual from trauma, because due to generational trauma in different ethnic groups, the boys are made to feel like they should be sexual predators and different stuff like that. Or they're just not, like, talked about for being hypersexual from trauma. But it depends, though, because, like, I knew one boy who fell into that cycle more so at 8, and he would be put on punishment, locked in his room, not allowed to leave to get food or anything for a whole year and stuff, whenever he would get caught having sex with anybody. But of course, that's also the side of, like, Jezebelic abusive parents. They keep the generational trauma going, and they don't care to talk to anybody about anything. Not to mention, people who've been SA can't talk to you about being SA, because if you even mention it, they flip out or they dissociate and they just don't respond. Which I've talked about that before. But anywho, nobody really wants to, no. I'm thinking about myself. And then lastly, I forgot this part. So, I've always said that I don't want to be younger, but I've never wanted to live long either. And that's something that a lot of people have always felt is concerned in, because for whatever reason, a lot of people want to live to like 100. I have no clue why. Okay, so I have to mention another thing. I also mentioned this in my most recent Young Achiever videos, maybe a couple of them, but I think the last two. It also makes me think about, like, different people I know who are alive and the ones who did end up dying, who always said they never saw themselves living past 12 or living past 15 or whatever. They didn't see themselves making it to 20. Some people do want to be younger, but that's typically because the trauma, and how, especially when you are in and of itself, for yourself due to different trauma stuff, and also not expecting yourself to even live
like well into your teenage years or even going into your 20s.
But nobody really wants
you didn't expect
to
anyways,
be
and you most likely are still in a situation where you don't see a future.
older fast, I don't think.
People want to destroy your life and make you feel like you
doing
gotta
what
go
they
back and
have
live your
to
life
do.
over.
Most people
instead of living
raise
it now.
themselves as I say all the time, and I know the few people that have like had this decent, or they just have cognitive dissonance and they claim that like their upbringing was decent. But the few people that have really had this happy-go-lucky family that was like nice and they like lived in a bubble with their family and were unaware of the situations of most people, they don't realize that most people raise themselves. People are just trying to survive. You're made to feel like you have to hold on to dear life till 18, and it's actually really crazy how people are like fed this lie that things change at 18. That's why I talked about in one of the interviews that I don't even think is public anymore with Nova from Software and Underbelly, one of the multiple interviews. I think she was 12 or 13 in this one, and she was saying that she used to always say, I can't wait till I get 18 so I can like go to school and all that, which I've already talked about in many videos, that you really can't enroll yourself in school at any age without a parent. And then like after a while, then you're too old at that point. So like you can't do it at 18 without a parent. And then it's just a lot of weird ages stuff with that. But she was talking about all that, but then she was like, I used to say that a lot, but then I realized nothing's actually going to change at 18. And that even goes back to another thing I mentioned about how people try to like beat it into your head that your abusive family system is the issue, and it's not the world that's the issue, when it really is the world that's the issue. Which is also why if you go through systematic abuse or trap or whatever, you see that like people know and they don't care, they don't want to get involved, they're enablers, they're flying monkeys, they don't know what to do to help, they're too scared to get involved, they rather pretend it doesn't exist or that you're lying or whatever in the world, because it's a world issue. You're made to think that like once you get away from your first abusers, you're not going to have to continuously run from the same demons that were in your abusers and different people, and even yourself. And that's actually not true. And in the end, there is no safe place for people with no family or abusive family. People who are unaware of trauma and trauma symptoms in the issues of the world aren't safe because they're traumatized themselves and are just in denial about it and how the world is, and they'll repeat their trauma symptoms unknowingly. But also the few nice people in the world who are healthy and have been lucky to have a decent upbringing where they weren't tortured pretty much, they live in a bubble with them and their family and probably don't even really go outside much, and they don't really have like a lot of, they don't really know like a lot of people and like the different experiences that people typically go through, and they live in like this weird happy-go-lucky la-la land bubble. And while they can be the 1% of healthy, nice people in the world because they haven't like experienced trauma like that, they can also, it also makes them very unsafe because like your trauma symptoms can be problematic to them. And also, the reality of the world that you know and you've experienced and that people that you know have experienced is not real to them. That's why they're almost as bad, or they can be actually way worse than people with cognitive dissonance about their own abuse. But anywho, people are just trying to survive. You have to, I wouldn't even say you have to grow up fast. The moment you're born, you're a man or a woman. No, not even that. The moment you're born, you're either a warrior or you're not. It goes those two ways. Like, for example, one of the things that I was supposed to mention during the beginning that I forgot about, which I have like some bullet points, and I list off some things, is something that Jay recently told me. And if no one knows who Jay is, if anybody watches this, I mentioned her in a couple of videos, but specifically the part 1 and the part 2 to the videos about the Miss S situation, or as she calls herself, the real woman of God, and the Lord told her to terrorize people pretty much. I don't remember the exact title. I put the videos in the description, but I have a whole playlist about Let Me Help You Lunatics. And I think it's titled, I don't really remember. But anywho, Jay told me recently, because I saw her the other day, that the grandson was telling Miss S, you only have 3 more years of me and I'm out of here because I'm 18 then. And apparently he has some godfather that's called whatever the word for godfather is in French. I can't remember. I think it was Patrice something. I don't even remember. But yeah, so pretty much he's ready to get out of there. I mean, I understand why. I really hope that from now and then she doesn't do anything too crazy or pull any reactive abuse too crazy to where he really has to hurt her, because he already has almost had to hurt her a couple of times from what Jay told me. That's why I find it weird that he got mad at Jay for having to curse Miss S out. Because, like, shoot, I was about ready to pepper spray her one day when she walked up on me outside. But she's always starting to call the police on people, and unfortunately the police do what they do, which is side with perpetrators, and I don't have time for that because they already don't like me. But it's still crazy though. How do you run up on somebody and then you're not gonna call the police on them? But that's kind of like what in the world. But anywho, what was the other thing I was gonna mention with that? Oh yeah, but that's just one example of how, like, you have to hold on to dear life till 18, really typically way older than that. And you're told, if you want to play video games, you're not allowed to play video games, wait till 18, but then, it's like, especially if you end up becoming a street kid, even if you become a street kid younger than 18, street kids aren't seen as kids, so then you're going to have people telling you, well, you're grown, or you've been grown, and you should have been got a job. You should have started working at 14 or 16, and you could have been got a house by now, even though with how ageism is, getting an apartment rented to you wouldn't be that easy. Not even just obviously under 18, but even like, especially under 25, there could be like some issues with that unless you really, really have the money and or somebody to sign with you, which was even mentioned in that video I made where I was reading that article that followed this one street kid who actually wasn't necessarily a street kid because he was homeless with his dad, but still, if I remember, I'll put that in the description. But I don't remember what I don't remember what the title was, because that wasn't the Street Kids Aren't Seen as Kids video. That was another video, but those two kind of go hand in hand. And it's funny because, like, of course working a job young is always going to be a good thing, but it's like when you're not a street kid and you're like in your teens and 20s, especially depending on what demographic you live in, well into your 20s, like, people are expecting you to, like, be, like, in college or school or whatever in the world, like, well, college or university. Or they're just expecting, well, yeah, I don't know what else to say about that, but it's like you just have more responsibilities put on you. And as I always talk about, when you've been in situations where you've been told that you're childish and to grow up ever since you were 4 and stuff, like I was, and like plenty of people I know have been told, it really causes like a lot of issues. Like, people who hate their kids especially, you'll always notice that they get mad at like their kids for doing usual baby stuff. Like they curse them out for laughing, they curse them out for talking, they curse them out for singing, they curse them out for not knowing how to read yet or having trouble counting and stuff like that. Because a lot of people never wanted kids in the first place. And like, even still to this day, obviously, in fact, more now than before I ran away. Like, I just see people even way older than me doing things that, like, if me and my siblings were to do it, we would get cursed out and called childish. And, like, the past couple of days, I've been even thinking about mentioning this situation that I recently actually had flashbacks about. So I remember during my abuse evidence channels, I would sometimes go through different files from when I was in the Cash for Kids system and read them. And I even had memories of not only that, but even something that, like, the different Cash for Kids system staff would say to me. And I remember going through some files that were written about me from when I was 12 and seeing that it said that I was childish and I laughed at everything and I thought everything was funny. I think, what was it? What was the word? It was another word that kind of like, oh yeah, the word thought. I thought the word thought was funny sometimes. And so that was written about, and then the lady said that I was childish and I thought everything. I already said that. What was it? It was something else though. Oh yeah, that I was emotionally immature and all that stuff, and yeah, so there was that. And of course, in these systems, just being a person, being a kid, thinking things are funny, crying, being sad, being happy, all that stuff is pathologized in those systems. So, of course, they're gonna be like that. Oh yeah, but something I forgot to say. This is gonna be all over the place. Going back to that thing with Miss S's grandson, and plenty of people like him. You're told that you have to wait till whatever age you get out your abuse situation, pretty much, to be able to do kid things and to be able to, like, be a kid, pretty much. Like, I know since running away, I spent a lot of my time every now and then at the park, like walking through parks, typically like the ones with walking paths, not the baby ones, because I don't want people to get it confused. Shoot. And honestly, ever since I became more chronically ill at 14, I haven't been able to get on a monkey bar since, especially before I started working on my health, because, like, when I lost all my muscle and I stopped being able to digest food and I dropped down 80 pounds, I wasn't strong enough for any of that. So definitely not, like, the kiddie parks, not even, like, the not jungle gym, what are those things called? The rock walls? Not even stuff like that, because, like, I haven't had the health for any of that stuff in years on end. Not even really at 12, but that was still before I lost all my muscle. But even then, like, I started to lose my ability to do all that stuff. So, like, I keep losing my train of thought. Because I'm over-explaining myself now to make sure I don't embarrass myself. But yeah, I spent, like, a good amount of time at the parks every now and then, because it was something else I couldn't do when I was younger that much. Even going to the library, because I've always liked the library, although, of course, when you're homeless, they don't want you there. They don't want you at the parks either, but they don't want you at the library because you're just a homeless person that's quote-unquote loitering when you're homeless. But I've always liked the library, but I wasn't always able to go as much as I wanted to do different things with my abuse situation, and then sometimes just transportation stuff. And it's like, there just is no such thing as being a child. It's like I always say, the youth are seen as cash cow, emotional punching bag, sex slaves, pretty much. There's no other way to put it. And then, like, the whole, oh yeah, and going back to that boy I mentioned, who was put on punishments for like a whole year and all that stuff. Now, I mention him pretty often. I mention this other girl who's pretty similar to him because realistically, people who develop BPD type issues from trauma, we all attract, well, everybody attracts what they are, really. We all attract what's in us. But especially with like the BPD type trauma symptoms, we attract each other. Even if like we don't have all the same symptoms, we still attract each other. So I've met plenty of girls that were similar to him as well. And of course, I have my similarities. And so, just like the others, he's been pretty much homeless since, I can't remember exactly when his mom passed, but I'd say maybe like 13, 14. And he's been bouncing, thrown around. He wants a job, he did have one, but he has transportation issues. He's also really poor. He wants to be able to work to be able to buy food and stuff that he needs. But jobs are ageist, and then it's like the racial side, the sexist side that goes hand in hand with the racial side. Different things like that. Like, for example, I know the racial stuff that me and other people I know went through trying to get jobs in Cali, and of course the homeless hate side. And then I think back to the Billy situation, as I mentioned all the time, because how things went for him was very much sexist and racial. And I always say that that's why, like, out of all the situations, people care less about his, because he's a boy and he's quote-unquote black, and he's also not gay, so they care about him a lot less. And it's like, he mentions wanting to get a job and go to school in LA, but just like somebody mentioned in a very rude way, the school probably wouldn't want him there. And I know, like, they didn't want me in their school districts either, not in LA, but in other parts of Cali. I stayed away from LA. And, what else was it? Oh, yeah, and then the jobs would be very racial, too. And then, of course, there's still going to be the ageism. Like, even when I went to Cali, I was still years older than him, and they still told me that they claimed I wasn't old enough to get a job, but that wasn't true. They kept telling me I needed a work permit. And it's like, one of the things about a work permit is that it's for people that are in school, so you can, like, say that if you start working, your grades aren't going to start falling or whatever, that your grades aren't already bad. And I wasn't in school anyway, so, like, it wasn't something I needed, and it's honestly not that easy to get. Okay, I had to go back and look at the bullet points in the end shot edit or video, because I couldn't remember what else I was supposed to mention. So I remember seeing a comment somewhere under a video that was talking about the whole thing that people say, which is that girls mature faster than boys do, but that kind of depends. People are saying it's just because girls have more pressures put on them, but I would say it really depends, especially in a Jezebelic society. And if you're unlucky enough to grow up with Jezebelic parents, or Ahab dad, or a Jezebelic mom, and your dad either isn't around or isn't allowed around, or he's taking care of other people's kids, it can really depend. But I would say, especially with the racial side, but a lot of people don't like to talk about it because so many people hate dudes because of, like, the perversion spirit issue. But I'll always say that the quote-unquote hatred for men, or quote-unquote creeps, it's still all bullcrap, because nobody's running around fighting or unaliving sex predators. All the hatred towards supposed men is just pushed on the boys who haven't done anything to anybody, who are being essayed and abused themselves, especially by their moms, but by their moms' boyfriends as well, and their dads. But anywho, to get to the point, because people just don't like the reality of what boys go through as well, especially melanated ones. But, what was I going to say? Oh yeah, so someone was like, I would have loved to be able to play in the mud as a 14-year-old girl without being told that I was being childish and needed to grow up and get out the mud because it wasn't ladylike. And to be truthfully honest, so one thing I could say is that I've always been considered childish and age regressed, although I could say that in the past 5 years or so, the aggression has gotten worse, but of course it's going to get worse after escaping my previous situation because I'm no longer in like the chaos, torture, fight or flight, which even makes me think about what Nova mentioned in her video, not from Soft and Underbelly, the other one that I mentioned sometimes. But I'll put that video in the description where she talks about homelessness and fight or flight and how it's worse when living with her different abusers. But anywho, to get back to the point, I can say this since people are raised in the internet and a lot of people don't even go outside these days. Realistically, playing outside when you're older than especially like 9 or 10, that's considered childish to a lot of people. Not wearing crop tops, not showing skin, which I've never liked to do either of those, even before I got sick. That's considered childish, and I would always get told by my relatives that I was childish and that I dressed like a baby and all that different little bull crap because I wouldn't walk around half naked pretty much. A lot of things are considered childish these days. Like, I know when I was 8, I didn't play with toys anyways, and I mention this story pretty often, but I was living with my grandma, and me and my dad had some collector's items for Star Trek that we got from a pawn shop, and we were trying to save them until they were worth some money. And so my grandma found them while doing the usual Jezebelic stuff, where they go through your stuff and they start stealing stuff and throwing stuff away. Typically, they keep it a secret when they throw it away, and they don't tell you. And then you'll just be running around looking for stuff and never find it, and they won't say anything, and they'll just be sitting there smiling the whole time. But anywho, my grandma found them while going through my stuff when I was 8. And then she took them and she said she was throwing them away because I was too old to play with toys. And I didn't even play with toys anyways. I didn't even have the attention span for stuff like that. Like, I remember when I was 6, I thought it was supposed to be a coping mechanism. And when it wouldn't work, I would just lay on the floor and start crying. And I was like, this isn't working. It's not making me feel better. But, anywho. But yeah, and then going outside. I've always liked going outside and going in the woods. But like, once you're older than 9, people say you're too old for that. And I think I mentioned, or I wanted to mention, the whole Craig of the Creek thing. Now, I know my brother used to watch this, and I would like watch it with him. When we wouldn't get in trouble for watching it because you were quote unquote too old. I saw this whole scene where like, once you get high school age, you have to stop playing in the woods and in the creek. And if you do still do it, you're going to get bullied for it and you have to pretend you don't. And it was kind of like this whole coming of age scene where like people were saying bye to the creek because they were too old. It was on Cartoon Network. I don't remember much else about that, but it makes you think about that too. And it's like, but sitting in the house staring at the walls or on a phone or looking at TV all day is really boring though. And I always said that ever since I was 6, I always saw myself living in the woods and escaping to do that right before the tribulation started to take off. So it's really interesting because it's like a lot of people, they live off, well, not a lot of people, some people live off grid and stuff like that, but it's like, it's considered childish apparently. So it's like, society just has all the standards and pressures, but one of the things that's really going to be pushed into your head that people are going to make sure you remember is that the younger you are, the more people are going to want to have sex with you. That's one of the things. And just like in one of my first couple of videos about paraphilias and the dronophile thing, which are my dronophiles are annoying, but more so my hypothetically pedo playlist, where I have all my different videos about paraphilias. So I may change the playlist title. But I show the screenshots where the dudes are where the dudes are saying their little bull crap, where they're like, No, 26 isn't the danger zone. That's too old. You gotta go younger than that or something like that. Or maybe it was 28, but either way, you're looking for teens to like mid 20s, typically, or at least teens or younger, or 20. And then anything older than 20s is the danger zone. And like even a couple of videos that are my ageism and cataclysmic repositioning playlist and my other ageism playlist, which is titled Uther, Infantilize and Adultified all at the same time. I think that's the title. I have plenty of other people's videos in those playlists, especially ones from a couple people that talk about like movies and shows. Like there's this one dude who talks about the whole issue of sexualizing boys, but how the media says it's okay because quote unquote they're hot. Some video that mentioned, I can't remember her name. Is it Amelia Rodrigo or is it, I don't know, something like that. I think she makes music, but I don't know. But they talk about the whole thing with like how teens and just younger people are the beauty standard and how the beauty standard revolves around pederasty and how it makes girls especially scared to get older because they're made to feel like they're not going to be attractive anymore because people want to use you more and give you attention more when they think you're young and hot. And then that lady who's made a couple videos about Larry Clark and how people got mad and said that they felt like she was calling him a pedo. And then she had to go over the whole thing in another video about how she never said that and how everybody in the videos or the movie was 18 plus. Even though realistically, as I talked about very recently in my last video, the 18 thing and pedo stuff really has nothing to do with each other. The definition of a pedo is not getting with people under 18. Those two things have nothing to do with each other whatsoever. And the age of consent is well below 18 anyways, but it definitely is all pederasty, but people don't like to hear that because realistically, I can understand people who've been in situations like I've been in where like when you're younger, especially when you're not in the same situation as most people your age, people try to make you feel weird for wanting to date people your own age, especially if you're surrounded by geronophiles who are traumatized and you're in denial and still in the same cycle. But other than that, a lot of people, they know that they're into pederasty, but they don't like for people to tell them that they are for whatever weird reason. And they love to do the whole, well, 16 is legal thing. And it's like, I mean, you already know what you like and you already know that you're into pederasty, so what's the point of even getting mad because somebody tells you that you are what you are? It's like they want you to label off their issues as something else. But that's not even really the point. Because I went into a little rant. But anywho, the lady who makes the Larry Clark videos, she had to talk about how everybody in those documentaries were 18 plus, but it does make me think though, because it's like, even recently I went to a skate park and there were people there who were in their 30s plus. Even this one buff dude who looked like he was like 40 something, but he was like really buff. And he was a skateboarder. But it's very interesting because it's like, even if I was like 10, if I was like riding a skateboard, I would have been told by my mom's boyfriend especially that that was childish. So it's really interesting. And that's why realistically there is no such thing as an adult or a child. People are just doing what they're told to do and being what they're told to be at different ages. And the stress of society and the insults of society are pushed on you to make you feel like you're not good enough. Always, no matter what you do. Just like I've said since I was 6, regardless of what I do or don't do, I'm in trouble anyways. And what was the other thing? And then, like, I even had a dream a couple of days ago, which maybe I'll make a video about it, but I don't really know. But it goes into the trauma symptoms, hypersexuality, and then not getting to go to school, which honestly, I've heard a lot from a lot of different people, especially people who are like into demonology and deliverance type stuff, that dreams about being in school symbolizes spiritual stagnation, retrogression, lack, and poverty. But it's like, I could get how it could mean that still, but I would always first think about the fact that I didn't get to go to school, but sometimes I still wish I could have went. And even though I know it would have went really, really bad and I would have just got bullied and beat up the whole time, not to mention, once I became chronically ill, like, sitting in a chair all day, that would have screwed up my circulation, my blood sugar would be low, it would have caused a lot of issues. But anywho, the dream was kind of like that, but it's like I was getting to be around people close to my age, at least some of them were. But like, pretty much, I was at a park, and I was gonna try to make friends, which is not something that me or really any of my relatives have ever been good at. And so I walked up to this boy, and pretty much he said that I couldn't come around him or his younger siblings, and that nobody wanted me near them pretty much because of things I did in elementary and being hypersexual and all that from trauma and demonization. So he was pretty much like, you can't come over here. And I really feel like that summary of that dream kind of is a telltale thing of why I really shouldn't wish that I did or could have what's considered quote-unquote normal, or the quote-unquote normal life, because that doesn't work out, and it wouldn't work out, and it wouldn't have worked out. And so I think I mentioned everything I was supposed to mention, so now I'm going to go to the Dipper thing. So I have my Gravity Falls breakdown playlist. That's been a long anticipated video since I was 8 or 9 years old, and I finally made all the videos I wanted to make about that. It was one of my favorite shows since I liked the occultic subliminal messages, which honestly just about weren't even subliminal. It's very occultic, but the cover-up theme is that it's about childhood and growing up. No, it's not. But I do mention that playlist, the symbology behind 12 and 13 and all of that. But anyhow, the first screenshot at the beginning of this video, that video talks about how Dipper's character flaw is that he wants to grow up too fast. But I'd say that's bullcrap. And I mean crap if he wants to grow up too fast because he wants to discover the quote-unquote unknown weirdness, and he wants to date Wendy, and he wishes he was older so he could date Wendy, which honestly, I mean, I could see that most people wouldn't like that age gap, since like he lied and said he was 13. Actually, he lied and said he was 13, but really, they didn't turn 13 till the end of the summer. Wendy was 15. I'm about to go on a rant. So actually, yeah, I guess like a lot of people wouldn't like the age gap. Maybe 12 and 14, but some people still don't like that. But 13 and 15 is kind of whatever. But it's obvious that Wendy wouldn't have dated him anyways, because Wendy was dating, what was his name, Roderick or something? I don't even remember. But anywho, it's like, did he really want to? Oh yeah, I do remember though that like he wanted to get chest hairs and all that. But then there's other people that like say that he was like a trans mask, which I don't really know that stuff really means. I've seen some videos talking about that. And I don't like any of the new, well, they're really not even new, it's all ancient philosophies, but I don't really like these labels that people pull out to confuse people more who are just different. But it's like, I don't really see how he wanted to grow up too fast, though. But, I mean, I guess he did want to be older. But shoot, Mabel was talking about a boyfriend the whole show. And I kind of feel like the past couple years of being out here, that's probably like the phase that I've been in. I remember when I was in Cali, I had some ladies tell me that I was boy crazy, but I don't think that's true, to be honest. But then, like I talk about in my last video, it's like, if you're hypersexual from a young age, then it's kind of like you never have a stereotypical media trope of quote-unquote puberty. So, like, you always want to get with people. I'm kind of like sugarcoating it, but so like I think a lot of people couldn't really describe having normal emotions when it comes to that at the normal age or whatever the normal age used to be. And even doctors say that most people become like active with romantic partners, at least for girls, when they're like 8, but then it's like, well, how old are the boys then? But I don't know what else to say about that. And then, once you get out here, whether you escape or you get kicked out or you're a dumped out foster kid, time does start to go by faster. Like, it kind of goes by slow while laying low, but it's like, well, for one, the time has to be sped up in the end, so that, because if it wasn't, even the very elect wouldn't be saved. So that's one thing, which is in either Matthew or Revelation. I sometimes get Matthew 24 and Revelation mixed up, but there's that. Then the whole pandemic thing since, what was it, 2019 or 2020? And then there was something else. And it's hard to think because I can't really breathe. But like, pretty much time's just been going by quicker in general. And I think that since I was already pretty regressed and developmentally delayed in ways, it was kind of bound to be whatever.
Throw stuff in. And I forgot about something else. A quote that I wanted to make a video about a couple months ago that revolves around street kids, or really just anybody like who doesn't have safe or any relatives at all. The quote is, too old to be safe. No, too young to be safe, but too old to be cared for. Also, the thing that people who are typically chomos anyways do, where they'll try to make younger people, especially street kids, feel like they're too old for a family, and they're like trying to infantilize themselves by one. But these are the same people that'll be 50, and they'll approach you at 16, 18, 19, 20, or whatever, and you'll be the grown woman, but they'll be the boy, quote-unquote, or the young man, even though they're 57. And so they play a lot of games. It's like you're infantilizing yourself, but then apparently they're not infantilizing themselves.